Hi everyone, and welcome to another video on accounting. Today we discuss debit and credit rules, an important fundamental topic in accounting. Now, we know that accounting is about recording and communicating whatever happens in the business. Now, only those things that are measured in dollars will be recorded and communicated. So for example, if we meet clients or meet suppliers, those things will not be recorded in accounting. However, when we purchase things and sell things, those have dollar implications. So those will be recorded. Now, recording is actually about changes that happen in these 5 items: the assets, expenses, revenue, capital, and liabilities of the business. Now, by changes, we mean that these things either increase or decrease. So assets increase or decreases. Similarly, revenue, capital, and liabilities of the business increase and decrease when transactions happen. Now, the rules for assets and expense are that increase will be debited and a decrease in assets and expenses will be credited. An example of this would be, say we purchase new machineries, new IT equipment. In this case, our IT equipment or machineries, which are assets, increase. We will debit them. And when we pay for them, our cash, which is an asset, decreases. So we are going to credit that. Now, the best way to learn these rules is to learn only the rules for assets and expenses, which is increase is debit and decrease is credit. And tell yourself that the rule for the other 3, revenue, capital, and liability, is the opposite. So an increase will be credit and a decrease will be debit. Learn these rules and let's practice a few examples here. Suppose that you are an accountant for TechBuzz. TechBuzz buys and sells IT equipment and provides repairs. So let's practice the rules for assets. So we know that assets increase is debit. Here's an example. Now, Mark is the owner of this business. A business usually needs cash, and the cash comes from the owner. And when TechBuzz receives this money from the owner, cash, which is an asset, increase, and we will debit that. Here's another example. TechBuzz is calling the supplier to order some furniture, and the supplier is getting the delivery ready, and soon TechBuzz will receive the delivery. So now TechBuzz receives those items, furniture items, and furniture is an asset. Assets increase in the business, so we will debit furniture. Let's look at another example. TechBuzz needs more money, so it calls the bank for a loan, and the bank sends money to TechBuzz. Again, TechBuzz gets cash, which is an asset, and assets increase. We will debit cash here. So that's an example for assets. One last example, say that when TechBuzz sells something to customers and allow time and give customers the time to pay. Now, this is what is called receivables. So receivables increase and receivables will be debited by TechBuzz. Last example on this, TechBuzz is purchasing some inventory so that it can sell them later, and here it got the inventory. So those inventory items increased in the business, we will say debit inventory. So assets increase in these situations. Let's look at an example where assets decrease. So an asset decrease, as we all know, is going to be credit. So here's an example. Now, Mark gave us money, the owner. Mark is the owner who gave the business money. And now he is taking some money out for personal use. So when he takes cash out of the business, cash decreases in the business, which is an asset. We will say credit cash. Similarly, Ted was supplied as furniture. When we pay Ted, our cash decreases. We will say credit cash. And similarly, employees that work for us, when we pay them, our cash will decrease. Therefore, we will credit cash. And when it comes to the bank, we return the money to the bank. Our cash again decreases. We will credit cash. And when we sold to a customer and allow them time to pay, and when that customer pays us here, obviously our cash increases, we will debit it, but at the same time our account receivables decrease, so we will credit account receivables. Taking another example, supplies are assets for the business. So when we use supplies, those supplies decreases. So we are going to credit the supplies. Finally, we have a customer. The customer is going to, we sell something to the customer. Here we go. And then our inventory decreases. We will say credit inventory. These were examples of assets increases and decreases. Let's take a look at example of expenses. Now, expense increase is always debit. So here is our employee. We TechBuzz used the services of these employees, or in this case, Susanna. So when we use services of others, that becomes an expense. Expense is debit, and we will record that as debit salaries expense. Finally, when we have supplies, which is an asset, and when we use supplies, supplies will decrease. Will increase. Supplies expense will increase, but supplies will decrease. So we are going to debit supplies here. Finally, utilities will always be debited as well when they increase. Taking a look at an example for revenue. A revenue increase is credit. So when we sell something to a customer here, our sales will increase. We will credit sales revenue. Here is another example. Here we sold something to Nature First, our customer, and therefore our revenues increase. Increase in revenue is credit, and we will credit revenue. Taking a look at examples of liabilities. Liabilities increase will be credited. Here's an example when Ted's decor supplier sells us something and then delivers those goods along with an invoice. So we have time to pay Ted Decor, and our liabilities increase. We have to pay Ted Decor at some time in the future. So that will be a credit accounts payable. Similarly, for the bank, when we get a loan from the bank sends us the money, but at some time in the future we have to return that loan. So we now have a liability which will be credit loan. How about a decrease in liabilities? A decrease in liabilities is always debit. Here's an example. You see this Tech Decor. We purchased something when we had to pay them. Now it's time to pay. When we pay them, our liabilities decrease. We will debit our liabilities, in this case accounts payable. Similarly, when we return the loans to the bank, our liabilities again decreases. So we will debit, in this case, loan, our liabilities. So those are the cases where liabilities decrease. Taking a look at an example for the capital. So we know that when the owner provides money to the business gets cash, so obviously it will debit cash, but that money came from the owner, which is capital. Capital increases and it will be credit. Similarly, when the owner takes money out for personal use, say it gets $400, it's actually drawing its capital, which we debit with drawings. So let's take a look at a few examples. Here is the same example that we have now. We are going to talk about both the debit and the credit. So when the owner gives the business money, the business gets cash, which is increase in asset, and this cash comes from the owner, which is an increase in capital. So we need to record it as debit cash and a credit capital. We have to record both sides of it, so a debit and a credit. Taking a look at, again, for assets increase debit and a liabilities increase credit. Here is our Ted Decor. Now we know we are ordering things from Ted Decor. When we order things, he sends those things to us. Our furniture asset increases. At the same time, we have to pay this person sometimes in the future. Our liabilities increase. So to record them, we will say debit furniture and credit accounts payable. Now, when we purchase things from the manufacturer, which is an inventory, and they send us a bill to pay in the future, therefore our inventories increase, and when we have to pay them in the future, that means our liabilities is created, and that's an increase. We are going to credit liabilities. So debit inventory, credit liabilities. This is how you're going to write it. Let's look at an example for decrease in assets and decrease in liabilities. So Ted Decor, wants the money back, right? Hey, Tech Buzz, time to pay me. So when we pay them, obviously two things happen. Our cash decreases, and similarly our liabilities also decrease. We no longer have a liability to Ted. So we are going to say to debit accounts payable a decrease in liabilities, and credit cash because cash decreased. Similarly, when we pay this person, this our supplier, our cash decreases, which is an asset, and our liabilities also decrease. We are going to debit accounts payable and credit cash. Taking a look at example here. So this is our customer. When we sell something to this customer and the customer sends us the money, so two things happened. We received the money, that is increase in cash, it's an asset, and since we sold something, that's our sales, and an increase in sales is also happened, which is credit. So an increase in cash is debit, and an increase in sales will be credit, and the journal entry is this. Taking a look at this example, so here we sold something to our customers and give them time to pay. That creates a receivables, and that's an increase in the receivables, and since we sold something, that means it's our sales. Increase in sales will be credited as well. So here's the journal entry to make. Debit account receivables 4,000, credit sales revenue 4,000. Let's take a look at example for expenses. We used the services of our employees. When we use the services, that becomes an expense will be debited, and since we are paying them, our cash will decrease, and that means assets decrease. Now asset decrease is credit, so the journal entry would be this: debit salaries expense and credit cash. Here is one more example. In this case, we are going to look at the owner withdrawals. The owner takes money for personal use. As you can see that the cash leaves the organization, which means the cash decreases, assets will decrease, and that cash is taken by the owner, and we call this drawings or withdrawals, and withdrawals of the owner increase, and therefore we are going to record this as debit drawings and credit cash. So here are the rules. Hopefully you have learned these rules. Watch this video again and again so that you can learn them very well. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification icon for more videos. And hopefully you've learned something. See you in the next video.